Jacquer's Sunrise over Rome. The first light touches the 7 hills of Rome like a gentle hand, awakening a city that never truly sleeps. It is the year 161 of the Common Era, and the sun rises over an empire that stretches from the mists of Britain to the sands of Egypt. But this morning, this particular morning, we are not here for emperors or conquests. We are here for her. Listen, do you hear it? The soft shuffle of sandaled feet on worn stone, the distant clatter of cartwheels echoing through narrow streets. Somewhere, a baker's oven crackles to life, sending the scent of fresh bread into the cool morning air. A baby cries, a woman hums, a dove calls from the red-tiled rooftops. This is Rome waking up, not the Rome of marble statues and golden palaces that fills the history books. This is the Rome of ordinary people. The Rome of women who rise before dawn to tend their families, who carry water from public fountains, who weave stories as carefully as they weave cloth. The Tiber flows lazily past the city's edge, catching fragments of sunlight like scattered coins. Along its banks, washerwomen are already at work, their voices carrying across the water in a rhythm as old as the river itself. They speak of children and weather, of the price of oil and the quality of wool. They speak of dreams deferred and small victories won. In the markets, vendors arrange their wares with practiced hands: olives from Hispania, silk from the distant east, pottery shaped by fingers we will never know. The air fills with a dozen languages, 100 dialects, the sound of an empire breathing. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the bustling forum and the gleaming temples, beyond the grand houses of the wealthy and the crowded tenements of the poor, somewhere in a villa overlooking the Palatine Hill, a man sits writing in the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, philosopher, emperor, the most powerful man in the known world. But at this moment, he is simply a man with a stylus and a wax tablet, trying to make sense of his thoughts, trying to understand what it means to live well, to rule well, to be human in a world that often seems to demand we be something more or something less. He writes to himself these private thoughts that will one day be called meditations. Words about duty and acceptance, about the fleeting nature of all things. He writes about the universe as a living organism, about the connections that bind us all together like threads in an invisible tapestry. But he does not write about the women. How could he? Even an emperor, even a philosopher, is limited by the boundaries of his world. He sees the empire from above, from the heights of power and privilege. He cannot see what we can see from here, from this quiet morning vantage point between history and story. He cannot see Julia, the baker's daughter, who rises each day at the 4th hour to help her father prepare the bread that will feed half the Subura district. He cannot see the way she kneads the dough with fierce concentration, the way she dreams of opening her own shop someday, the way she saves copper coins in a hidden jar beneath her sleeping mat. He cannot see Claudia, the scribe's wife, who has taught herself to read by studying her husband's work in secret, who traces letters in the dust when no one is watching, who hungers for knowledge the way others hunger for food. He cannot see Livia, the weaver, whose fingers know the language of wool and linen better than her tongue, knows Latin, who creates patterns that tell stories of her grandmother's village in Gaul, stories of gods and heroes that have no names in Roman mythology. These women move through the awakening city like ghosts in the official histories. They leave no monuments, no inscriptions carved in marble. Their names do not appear on the lists of consuls or the records of military campaigns, but they are here. They have always been here, carrying the real weight of the world on their shoulders. The morning light grows stronger now, painting the walls of the city in shades of gold and amber. In a small apartment above a pottery shop, a woman named Antonia sits by her window, watching the sun climb higher. Her hands rest on her swollen belly. She's perhaps 6 months with child, her second. Her husband left before dawn to work in the brick factories outside the city walls. He will not return until after dark, covered in clay dust, exhausted. It is good work, steady work. But it leaves her alone for long stretches with their toddler son and the growing weight of worry that all expectant mothers carry. She thinks about her own mother, who died giving birth to what would have been Antonia's younger brother. She thinks about the midwife who lives 3 streets over, who has promised to attend the birth, but whose hands shake more each year. She thinks about the future. What kind of world she is bringing this child into? Will there be peace? Will there be enough grain? Will the Tiber flood again this year, as it did when she was a girl, washing away homes and lives with equal indifference? These are the questions that keep her awake at night, staring at the ceiling while her son sleeps beside her and her husband snores softly. These are the thoughts that Marcus Aurelius, for all his wisdom, cannot think for her. The emperor writes about accepting what cannot be changed, about focusing on what lies within our control, and perhaps there is wisdom in this. But Antonia's world is different. Her sphere of control is measured in daily bread and clean water, in keeping her son healthy and her husband content, in preparing for a birth that might go well or might end everything she has worked to build. Her philosophy is not written in books. It lives in her hands, in her choices, in the 1,000 small acts of love and determination that get her through each day. It is a philosophy of survival, of making something beautiful from whatever materials the world provides. The sun is fully up now, casting sharp shadows between the buildings. The city hums with activity, merchants calling their wares, children playing in the streets, the constant sound of construction as Rome continues to grow, to expand, to reach toward some impossible vision of permanence. In the grand scheme of the empire, this is just another day, just another sunrise in an endless series of sunrises. The legions march on distant frontiers, senators debate in marble halls, ships arrive from far-off provinces carrying tribute and trade goods. But here in this moment, in this gentle hour when the light is soft and the air still carries the coolness of night, here is where the real story lives. In the spaces between the official histories, in the lives of women who shape the world not through conquest or decree, but through the patient, persistent work of simply being human. This is their story. The story of Julia and Claudia and Livia and Antonia, and countless others whose names we will never know. Women who lived and loved and worried and dreamed in the shadow of an empire that barely acknowledged their existence. They were not empresses or priestesses or legendary figures. They were something more important. They were real. They were the foundation upon which everything else was built. They were the ones who kept the world turning while the powerful men wrote their philosophies and fought their wars. And as the morning unfolds around us, as the city settles into the rhythm of another day, we begin to understand that their stories, these quiet, overlooked stories, might be the most important ones of all. Because in the end, when the empires crumble and the monuments fall and the names of emperors fade into footnotes, what remains is this: the memory of women who rose with the sun and did what needed to be done, who found ways to be brave in small moments, who created meaning from the raw materials of ordinary life. Their Rome is waiting for us, patient as the hills themselves, ready to reveal its secrets to anyone willing to listen. The baker's day begins, and so we descend from the hills into the narrow streets where shadows still pool like dark water, where the real work of living begins. Listen, can you hear it? The soft scrape of wooden sandals against stone, the gentle creak of a door opening, the whispered prayer to Vesta, goddess of hearth and home. Marcus Aurelius may be writing his morning thoughts in marble halls, but here, in a small bakery tucked between a fuller's shop and a wine merchant's stall, another kind of meditation is beginning. His name is Gaius, Gaius Flavius Mercator, though no one will remember it, no historian will record it, no monument will bear it carved in stone. But for now, in this moment, he is the most important man in his small corner of the world. The bakery is still dark when he enters, still holding the coolness of night. His hands, already dusty from years of flour, move with the certainty of ritual. First, the oil lamp. Then the careful banking of coals that have been sleeping since yesterday's baking. Then, the quiet assessment of what needs to be done. Gaius is 43 years old enough to remember when bread was scarcer, when the grain ships from Egypt were delayed by storms, and mothers queued with hollow eyes and empty baskets. He learned his trade from his father, who learned it from his father, in the way of all useful things. But tonight, as he measures grain with hands that know the weight of survival, something feels different. There have been whispers, rumors carried by merchants from the eastern provinces, talk of a strange sickness, a fever that comes without warning, the kind of news that makes mothers hold their children closer, that makes bakers wonder how long the grain ships will keep coming. Gaius pushes the thoughts away. Worry is a luxury he cannot afford, not when half the neighborhood depends on his ovens for their daily bread. He begins with the starter, the living heart of his bakery. This culture of wild yeast and grain has been alive longer than he has, passed down from baker to baker like a sacred flame. Every morning, he feeds it with fresh flour and water. Every morning, it responds with the sweet, sour scent of fermentation. "There you are," he murmurs to the bubbling mixture. "Ready for another day?" The starter doesn't answer, but Gaius knows its moods. He can tell by the smell, by the texture, by the way it moves when he stirs it, whether today's bread will be light and airy or dense and disappointing. Today, it seems eager, alive with possibility. Outside, the city is beginning to stir. He can hear the distant clatter of cartwheels on stone, the call of an early vendor hawking yesterday's fish, the sleepy complaints of children being roused for morning lessons. But inside his bakery, time moves differently. Here, he works by older rhythms, the rhythm of kneading, the rhythm of rising dough, the rhythm of fire and transformation. Gaius measures flour by the handful, salt by the pinch, water by instinct rather than measurement. His father never taught him with numbers, only with feeling. "The dough will tell you what it needs," the old man used to say. "Learn to listen." And Gaius has learned to listen, to the way wet flour sounds when it's ready to become dough, to the subtle change in texture when gluten begins to form, to the soft whisper of air bubbles forming in properly risen bread. As he kneads, his mind wanders to Julia, his daughter, 16 now. With her mother's quick wit and her grandfather's stubborn streak. She should be married by now, should be making bread in her husband's house, but she keeps finding reasons to delay. "Just another season, Papa," she says, "just until the festivals are over." He suspects she's afraid, not of marriage, but of leaving, of stepping away from the familiar rhythms of this small bakery, this small life, into something unknown. He understands. Change, even good change, requires a kind of courage that doesn't come naturally to everyone. The dough beneath his hands is smooth now, elastic, ready for its first rise. He shapes it into a ball, places it in a well-oiled bowl, covers it with a clean cloth. Now comes the waiting, the part of baking that cannot be rushed. While the dough rests, Gaius tends the fire, banking coals, adding wood, adjusting the dampers until the heat is just right. Too hot, and the bread will burn before it bakes through. Too cool, and it will emerge pale and dense, more like hardtack than proper bread. The fire is its own kind of meditation, hypnotic, ancient. He thinks of all the bakers who have stood before similar fires, in similar shops, throughout the long history of Rome, feeding the city, one loaf at a time. It's humble work, but necessary work, the kind of work that keeps civilization running, even when emperors fall and armies march and plagues threaten. Through the small window above his work table, Gaius can see the first hint of dawn touching the tops of the tallest buildings. Soon, his neighbors will begin to wake. Soon, they'll start thinking about breakfast, about the day ahead, about the bread they'll need to sustain them through whatever challenges await. He checks the dough. It has doubled in size, full of air and possibility. Time for the next step. He turns it out onto his floured work table, divides it into portions, shapes each piece with practiced efficiency. Round loaves for families, long loaves for the tavern keeper, small rolls for children's lunches. Each shape requires its own technique, its own timing. The round loaves need deep scores to allow for expansion. The long loaves need to be turned just so. To develop the proper crust, the rolls need a lighter touch, less handling, more intuition. As he works, Gaius finds himself thinking about legacy, about what remains when a man's work is done. Emperors build monuments to ensure their names survive. Generals win battles to secure their place in history. But bakers create something that disappears by evening, something that exists only to be consumed, to nourish, to sustain life for another day. And yet, perhaps that's its own kind of immortality. Perhaps there's something profound in creating beauty that doesn't last, in putting love and skill into something that will be gone by sunset, but will have served its purpose perfectly. The shaped loaves go onto wooden peels, ready for the oven. But first, they need time to rise again, to develop flavor, to become more than just flour and water and salt. Gaius steps outside for a moment. The air is cool, fresh, full of the promise of morning. Somewhere in the distance, he can hear the sound of women drawing water from the public fountain, the soft murmur of early conversations, the gradual awakening of another day in the eternal city. When he returns to his bakery, the loaves have begun their final transformation. Soon, they'll be ready for the fire, ready to become the bread that will sustain his neighbors, his community, his small corner of the empire. He slides the first batch into the oven, watches the dough spring to life in the heat, listens to the subtle sounds of baking. This, he thinks, is prayer enough, this daily act of creation, this quiet service to the endless human need for nourishment. Outside, Rome continues to wake, but here, in this small bakery, time moves at the pace of rising dough and patient fire. Here, the real work of civilization continues, one loaf at a time. The scribe's quiet labor. The first rays of morning light filter through the narrow window of the scriptorium, casting long shadows across the wooden writing desk where Marcus sits, already at work, his fingers, stained permanent brown from years of ink, move with practiced precision across the parchment, each letter, each curve and line, deliberate as a prayer. He is not Marcus Aurelius, though he shares the emperor's name. He is simply Marcus the scribe, keeper of words, guardian of the empire's endless correspondence. While the emperor writes philosophy for his own soul, this Marcus copies the practical documents that keep Rome functioning: tax records, legal contracts, military dispatches, marriage certificates, death notices, the permanence of ink, the fragility of human memory. This is what occupies his thoughts as he works. This strange contradiction at the heart of his profession, the words he copies will outlast the people who wrote them, outlast the people they describe, perhaps outlast Rome itself. He dips his reed pen carefully, watching the dark liquid cling to the tip before touching parchment. Today's work includes a merchant's will, a senator's letter to his son in Gaul, a physician's notes on treating fever, each document, someone's attempt to reach across time, to leave proof they existed. The scriptorium is quiet except for the scratch of his pen, the occasional rustle of parchment, the distant sounds of the city waking beyond these walls. 2 other scribes work at desks nearby, but they maintain the professional silence of their craft. Words are sacred. They demand reverence, focus, the kind of attention most people reserve for prayer. Marcus pauses, flexes his fingers, studies the half-completed page before him. It's a letter from a mother in Alexandria to her daughter here in Rome, filled with worries about the girl's health, advice about marriage, gentle scolding about not writing often enough. The same concerns mothers have carried since the world began, now preserved in his careful script. He thinks of his own mother, dead these 15 years, and wonders what letters she might have written if she'd known how to form letters. What wisdom went unrecorded, what love unexpressed, simply because the words existed only in breath, in gesture, in the temporary language of the living. The morning light shifts, grows stronger, illuminates the dust motes dancing in the air above his desk, each particle, visible for a moment in the beam, then lost again to darkness, like lives, he thinks, like all the stories that never get written down. But this is why his work matters. This is why he arrives before dawn, stays past sunset, why his back aches and his eyes strain and his fingers cramp around the pen. Someone must be the guardian of human words, the keeper of all these small attempts at immortality. He returns to the merchant's will, copying the careful legal language that will determine how a lifetime of accumulated wealth gets distributed. The man owned shops in 3 provinces, ships that carried grain from Egypt, a villa with gardens that took 20 slaves to maintain, all of it reduced now to lines of text, to his precise handwriting on treated animal skin. The merchant died last month. Marcus remembers copying the death notice, fever, like so many others lately. The physician's notes speak of treatments tried, herbs and bloodletting and prayers to Asclepius, all futile in the end. But the will lives on. The words Marcus copies will keep the merchant's intentions alive long after his body has returned to dust. This is the strange power of his profession, this ability to make the temporary permanent, to give weight and substance to human intention. When he writes, he participates in a kind of magic, transforming thought into thing, making the invisible visible. A shadow falls across his desk, and he looks up to see Quintus, the head scribe, reviewing the morning's assignments. The older man nods approvingly at Marcus's work, notes the steady progress, the clean formation of each letter. Quintus has been here 30 years, has seen emperors rise and fall, has copied documents that shaped the fate of provinces. The senator's letter needs to reach the morning courier, Quintus says quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Even conversation here feels like interruption, like breaking the sacred concentration that good copying requires. Marcus nods, sets aside the will, reaches for the senator's correspondence. The letter is addressed to his son, a young officer stationed with the legions on the German frontier, full of fatherly advice about duty, honor, the importance of maintaining Roman dignity even in barbarian lands. As he copies, Marcus finds himself wondering about the son, whether he'll live to receive these words, whether the advice will comfort or burden him. The frontiers are dangerous, especially lately, with tribes growing bolder, more organized in their resistance to Roman rule. But this, too, is not his concern. Not really. His job is preservation, not interpretation. His task is to ensure the words survive their journey, that the senators' love and worry reach their intended destination in exactly the form intended. The morning progresses. The scriptorium fills with the quiet industry of record-keeping. Other scribes arrive, take their places at worn wooden desks, begin their own careful work of copying and preservation. The sound of multiple pens scratching parchment creates a gentle rhythm, like rain on roof tiles, like the whisper of wind through leaves. Marcus completes the senator's letter, moves on to the physician's notes. These fascinate him most, these attempts to understand the human body, to catalog symptoms and treatments, to build knowledge that might help future healers save lives the current generation cannot. The physician writes about fever, about the strange sickness that's been appearing more frequently in the eastern districts. Patients complain of headache, weakness, swollen glands in the neck and groin. Some recover, others die within days, and no treatment seems to make much difference. Marcus copies each observation faithfully, though the medical language sometimes challenges him. Words borrowed from Greek, technical terms for body parts and procedures he's never seen. But accuracy is everything in his profession. Every letter must be exact, every word precisely rendered. He thinks of Julia, the baker's daughter he sometimes sees in the market, wonders if she's heard these rumors of sickness, if her father worries about contamination from customers, from the grain that comes from distant provinces where strange diseases might flourish. The thought disturbs his concentration, and he forces himself back to the text. Personal concerns have no place here, in this sanctuary of words, this temple of preservation. The physician's notes demand his full attention, his complete fidelity to the written word. Midday approaches, and with it the heat that will make afternoon work more difficult. But Marcus has found his rhythm now, the meditative state that good scribes cultivate, where hand and eye and mind work in perfect harmony, where the act of copying becomes a form of prayer, a way of serving something larger than himself. Outside, Rome continues its endless business, its commerce and politics and daily drama. But here, in this quiet room, the real work of civilization continues. The patient, essential, largely invisible work of preserving human words, human thoughts, human attempts to reach across the void of time and speak to future generations, one letter at a time, one document at a time, one carefully formed word at a time. The potter's creative solace, the sound of the potter's wheel, soft and rhythmic, drifts through the narrow alley behind the forum. It's a sound as old as civilization itself, clay spinning beneath patient hands, water dripping steadily into worn grooves. Cassia sits before her wheel, her hands moving with the certainty that comes from 20 years of practice. The clay rises between her palms, obedient, responsive, transforming from shapeless earth into something useful, something beautiful. She learned this craft from her mother, who learned it from hers. 3 generations of women, shaping vessels that will hold wine and oil, water and grain, the essential elements of Roman life. But for Cassia, the wheel offers something more than livelihood. It offers peace. Her hands guide the clay upward, feeling for the perfect thickness, the right curve. There's no forcing this work, no rushing. The clay will tell her what it wants to become, and she has learned to listen. The morning light filters through the small window of her workshop, illuminating motes of clay dust that dance in the air like tiny spirits. Everything here is touched with earth. Her apron, her arms, even her hair carries the scent of river clay and wood smoke from the kiln. She thinks of the hands that will someday hold this bowl, the meals it will serve, the families it will nourish. Perhaps a mother will fill it with warm porridge for her children on a cold morning, or a grandmother will use it to mix herbs for healing. Every vessel she creates will become part of someone's daily ritual, their small ceremonies of survival and care. The wheel turns, steady as a heartbeat, and Cassia finds herself thinking of time itself. How strange that something so permanent can emerge from something so fluid, so changeable. Yesterday, this clay was part of the riverbank. Tomorrow it will sit on someone's table, holding their bread, their olives, their simple abundance. Her fingers smooth the rim, checking for imperfections. She's learned that the small flaws, the barely perceptible wobbles, often make a piece more beautiful, more human. Perfection belongs to the gods, but usefulness, daily beauty, that belongs to mortals. A customer enters. An elderly woman Cassia has known for years. She examines the finished pieces with careful hands, testing their weight, their balance. They speak quietly about her daughter's wedding, the vessels needed for the new household. It's an old conversation, repeated countless times, but it never loses its importance. When the woman leaves, carrying her carefully wrapped purchases, Cassia returns to her wheel. She centers a new piece of clay, feeling its resistance, its willingness. Some days the clay fights her, refuses to cooperate, collapses again and again. Other days, like today, it seems eager to become something new. She thinks of the emperor, writing his thoughts in his private chambers, and wonders if his words bring him the same satisfaction she finds in shaping clay. Both of them, in their different ways, are trying to create something lasting, something that will outlive the hands that made it. But clay is honest. It cannot lie about its nature, cannot pretend to be more than earth and water and fire. Words, even the wisest words, can deceive, can promise more than they deliver. A bowl, a cup, a simple jar. These things keep their promises quietly, day after day, year after year. The wheel slows, and Cassia examines her work. A water jar, elegant in its simplicity, with a handle that will fit comfortably in any hand. She can see it already, sitting in someone's kitchen, filled with fresh water from the public fountain, reflecting morning light through a window. She thinks of her daughter, married now and living across the city, who sometimes brings her grandchildren to the workshop. The little ones love to touch the wet clay, to feel it squish between their fingers, to try their small hands at the wheel. She sees in their faces the same wonder she felt as a child, the magic of transformation, of creation. The afternoon grows warm, and Cassia moves her work to the shaded corner of the shop. She has learned the rhythms of clay, how it behaves in different weather, how humidity and heat affect its willingness to be shaped. Like any relationship, it requires attention, patience, respect. She begins work on a set of cups, small vessels for wine or water, each one similar but not identical. Her hands know this shape so well that she can almost work without thinking, letting muscle memory guide the clay while her mind wanders. She remembers her husband, dead these 5 years, who used to sit in the corner of the shop in the evenings, mending tools or simply watching her work. He never tried to learn the craft himself, but he understood its importance, its necessity. "You make homes possible," he used to say, And she knew he was right. Every vessel she creates will become part of someone's daily life. Their small rituals of nourishment and care. The cup that holds morning wine, the bowl that serves evening soup, the jar that stores precious oil. These things matter. These things make civilization possible. The clay responds to her touch, rising, curving, becoming. She thinks of all the hands that have shaped clay before hers, all the potters who have sat at wheels like this, creating the vessels that hold human life together. It's a conversation across time, each generation teaching the next, passing down not just technique but understanding. The shadows grow longer, and Cassia knows the day's throwing is nearly done. Soon she'll cover the new pieces, protect them from drafts while they dry slowly, evenly. Tomorrow she'll trim them, refine their shapes, prepare them for the kiln's transforming fire. But for now, there's just this moment, this clay, this wheel turning steadily beneath her hands. The city beyond her workshop carries on its endless business, its politics and commerce, its grand designs and imperial ambitions. But here, in this small space filled with earth and water and the ancient knowledge of making, something equally important happens, something that has always happened and always will. The quiet, essential work of creating the vessels that hold human life, human need, human hope, one bowl at a time, one cup at a time, one carefully shaped piece at a time. The wheel slows, stops, and Cassia sits back, her hands finally still, around her. The evidence of her day's work waits patiently, ready for whatever purpose it will serve, whatever hands will claim it, whatever small corner of human life it will make possible. A walk through the forum. The afternoon light grows longer, softer, and across the city, people begin to move toward the center of their world, not by plan, not by arrangement, but drawn by some invisible current that has pulled Romans to the forum for centuries. Julia leaves her father's bakery, flour still dusting her fingertips, her steps slow and thoughtful. The day's bread is sold, the ovens banked, and something calls her toward the heart of the city. Perhaps it's the way the light falls between the buildings at this hour, or perhaps it's simply the need to be somewhere larger than herself, somewhere that reminds her she is part of something vast and enduring. Marcus the scribe sets down his reed, rolls his final scroll, and feels the familiar ache in his shoulders that comes with a day of careful work. The words he has copied today will outlive him, but right now, in this moment, he needs to walk among the living, to see faces instead of letters, to hear voices instead of the scratch of stylus on wax. Cassia wipes her hands clean, one finger at a time, feeling the clay release its hold on her skin. Her workshop grows quiet, the wheel still, the day's vessels waiting in neat rows like patient children, but her feet know where they want to carry her, toward the great open space where all of Rome comes to see and be seen, to remember who they are, who they belong to. And from her window, Antonia watches the streams of people moving through the streets below, all flowing in the same direction. Her hand rests on her growing belly, feeling the flutter of life within. And she makes a decision. Today, she will not merely watch. Today, she will walk among them. The forum at evening is a different creature than the forum at dawn. Gone is the urgent energy of morning commerce, the sharp voices of merchants calling their wares, the quick footsteps of those with business to conduct. Instead, there is something softer here, more contemplative. People move slowly, their day's work behind them, their evening meals still ahead, caught in that suspended moment when time seems to pause and breathe. Julia enters through the eastern approach, past the Temple of Vesta where the eternal flame flickers behind marble columns. She has walked this path 1,000 times, but tonight the familiar feels somehow precious, as if she is seeing it with new eyes. The great basilicas rise around her like stone forests, their shadows long and purple in the slanted light. She is not alone in this quiet pilgrimage. Families walk together, parents pointing out monuments to wide-eyed children, elderly couples moving arm in arm with the careful steps of those who have learned to treasure ordinary moments. Young men cluster near the speakers' platforms, their voices low and serious, discussing philosophy or politics or the rumors that seem to multiply in the evening air like shadows. Marcus approaches from the north, past the shops where scribes like himself sell their services to those who cannot write their own letters home, their own wills, their own declarations of love or business. He knows many of these men, has shared wine with them, complained about difficult customers, celebrated successful commissions, but tonight he walks past without stopping, drawn by something he cannot name. The great columns of the basilicas catch the light like captured sunbeams, each fluted surface a study in shadow and gold. Marcus has copied architectural plans, knows the mathematics behind these soaring spaces, but knowing and feeling are different things entirely. Here, surrounded by stone that will outlast empires, he feels both infinitely small and somehow eternal. Cassia comes from the south, through the market district where her pottery is sold alongside goods from every corner of the known world, silk from distant lands, spices that speak of journeys beyond imagination, wine from vineyards she will never see, but it is her simple bowls, her honest cups, that make it possible for people to enjoy these exotic treasures. The thought brings her a quiet satisfaction, a sense of belonging to something larger than any single craft. The forum spreads before her like a stone sea, and she joins the gentle tide of evening wanderers. Children run between the columns, their laughter echoing off marble walls, while their parents follow at a more measured pace. Slaves hurry past on final errands of the day, their faces showing the weariness that comes with serving others' needs before their own. Antonia moves carefully through the crowds, one hand always protective over her unborn child. But her eyes are bright with the pleasure of being among people again. She has spent too many days watching life from her window, and now she remembers the particular joy of being part of the great human river that flows through this ancient space. But beneath the evening's gentle rhythms, there is something else. A tension that shows itself in hushed conversations, in the way people's eyes linger on strangers' faces, searching for signs of illness, of fever, of the thing that no one wants to name directly, the plague. It moves through the empire like a shadow, taking soldiers first, then traders, then anyone who comes into contact with those who travel the great roads that connect Rome to her farthest territories. In the Forum, people speak of it in whispers, in euphemisms, in prayers offered at the temples that ring this sacred space. Julia overhears fragments. My cousin in Gaul writes that whole villages, the legions returning from Mesopotamia. The physicians say it spreads through the air itself. The words drift past like smoke, impossible to ignore, impossible to fully grasp. Marcus watches a group of senators deep in serious discussion, their togas bright white against the darkening sky, and wonders what decisions they are making, what preparations, what measures against an enemy that cannot be fought with swords or strategy. He thinks of all the documents he has copied lately, wills written by healthy men, letters to distant relatives, as if people are trying to set their affairs in order, just in case. Cassia notices how people move differently now, with more space between them. fewer casual touches, fewer shared cups of wine from the vendors who work the forum's edges. Even her pottery sells differently. People wanting their own vessels, their own cups, reluctant to share what once would have been offered freely. And Antonia, carrying new life in a world suddenly uncertain, feels the weight of responsibility like never before. What kind of world is she bringing this child into? What promises can she make? What safety can she offer? When even the mighty Roman Empire seems vulnerable to forces beyond its control. But still, they walk, all of them, drawn together by something stronger than fear. The Forum has seen plagues before, wars, invasions, the rise and fall of emperors, and it endures. The stones remember everything and nothing. Each generation believes their struggles are unique, their fears unprecedented, their love and loss somehow different from all who came before. As the sun sinks lower, painting the marble columns rose and gold, the evening crowd begins to thin. People drift away toward their homes, their evening meals, their families waiting in lamplight. But for a moment, just a moment, Julia and Marcus and Cassia and Antonia are all here together. Strangers who will never know each other's names, but who share this space, this time. This quiet understanding that some things matter more than fear. The Forum grows peaceful, expectant, ready for whatever tomorrow will bring. Reflections and rest. The Forum grows peaceful, expectant, ready for whatever tomorrow will bring. And so they turn toward home, these four souls who have shared this ancient space without knowing it. Julia gathering her cloak against the cooling air, Marcus adjusting the leather satchel that holds his precious scrolls, Cassia brushing the last traces of clay dust from her hands, Antonia placing a protective palm over the life growing within her. Each footstep on the worn stones carries them away from this moment of quiet communion, back toward the familiar rhythms of evening, back toward the small sanctuaries they have built within their ordinary lives. Julia walks slowly through the narrow streets, her mind still turning over the conversations she overheard in the Forum, the worried whispers about distant troubles, the determined laughter of children playing between the columns. She thinks of her father, probably already preparing the evening's final batch of bread, his hands moving with that same steady rhythm that has marked every day of her 23 years. There is comfort in this thought, in the knowledge that some things remain constant even when the world feels uncertain, that tomorrow there will still be flour and water and fire, still be the ancient alchemy that transforms simple ingredients into sustenance. The lamplight spills golden from the bakery windows as she approaches, and she can smell the familiar scent of yeast and warmth that has been the backdrop of her entire life. Her father looks up as she enters, flour dusting his graying hair, his eyes crinkling with the smile that has always made her feel seen, understood, valued beyond measure. "How was your day, my dear one?" he asks, and in his voice she hears not just a father's love, but something deeper, a recognition that her thoughts and observations matter, that her unmarried state does not diminish her worth, that she is complete exactly as she is. They work together in comfortable silence, she organizing the coins from the day's sales while he shapes the last loaves for tomorrow's early customers. This is their meditation, their shared prayer, this quiet collaboration that speaks of years of understanding, of a love that needs no elaborate declarations, only presence, only the willingness to show up for each other day after day after day, across the city. Marcus the scribe climbs the stairs to his modest rooms above the document archive, his fingers still stained with ink, his mind still processing the weight of all the words he has preserved today, the letters of love and business, the wills that attempt to extend human intention beyond death, the medical notes that chronicle both suffering and healing, all of it flowing through his careful hands, all of it becoming part of the great river of human record that he tends with such devotion. He lights a single oil lamp and settles at his small wooden table, not to work but simply to sit with the day's accumulation of stories, to let them settle in his consciousness like sediment in still water. There is something sacred in this evening ritual, this quiet acknowledgement of his role as keeper of other people's attempts at permanence, guardian of their hope that words might outlast flesh, that love might survive in carefully formed letters long after the hearts that felt it have stopped beating. Tonight he thinks of his own words, the ones he has never written, the thoughts and dreams and fears that exist only in the private chambers of his heart. Perhaps someday he will find the courage to set them down, to trust his own story to the permanence of parchment. But for now, it is enough to be the vessel through which other voices flow, to know that his careful attention gives weight and dignity to every human attempt at meaning, every desperate or joyful or mundane effort to say, I was here, I mattered, I loved. The lamp flame flickers gently, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and Marcus feels a deep contentment settle over him like a well-worn cloak. Tomorrow there will be more words to preserve, more stories to tend, more opportunities to serve this ancient human need to be remembered, to be understood, to leave some trace of beauty in the world. In her workshop, Cassia runs her hands one final time over the vessels she has shaped today, feeling the cool smoothness of clay that has found its form, that has moved from possibility into purpose. Each pot and bowl and jar represents hours of patient attention, of listening to what the earth wanted to become, of collaborating with forces far older and wiser than human ambition. She thinks of all the hands that will eventually hold these vessels, the water they will carry, the food they will contain, the flowers they might cradle on someone's windowsill. This is her gift to the future, these simple containers that will make daily life a little more beautiful, a little more possible. There is profound satisfaction in this thought, in knowing that her work serves not glory or fame, but the quiet necessities that make civilization possible, that make human flourishing something more than mere survival. The wheel sits silent now in the gathering darkness, but Cassia can still feel its rhythm in her bones, still sense the ancient conversation between human intention and natural material that has been her life's work. Tomorrow she will return to this place, will center herself once again in this timeless dance of creation, will listen once more for the whispered instructions that clay gives to those patient enough to hear. She washes her hands in the basin by the window, watching the water turn cloudy with dissolved earth, and feels a deep gratitude for this work that connects her so directly to the fundamental elements, to the basic materials from which all human making begins: fire and earth and water and air. The same elements that shaped the first vessels, the same forces that will continue long after her own hands have returned to dust. And in her comfortable home, Antonia settles into the chair by her window, the same chair where she has spent so many hours watching the life of the street unfold below, where she has learned to find adventure and connection in the simple act of witnessing, of paying attention, of letting her heart expand to hold the joys and sorrows of neighbors she has never formally met, but whose lives have become dear to her through careful observation. The child within her moves gently, a flutter of life that fills her with wonder and anticipation, and a fierce protective love that surprises her with its intensity. She places both hands over her rounded belly, feeling the miracle of this new existence that is forming in darkness, that is preparing to join the great human conversation, to add its own voice to the chorus of hopes and dreams and struggles that she watches from this window every day. What kind of world will this child inherit? She wonders. What stories will shape its understanding? What quiet philosophers will guide its steps through the complexities of being human in an uncertain time? She thinks of Julia's thoughtful independence, of Marcus's careful devotion to preserving human words, of Cassia's patient collaboration with ancient materials, of all the unnamed others who go about their daily work of making life possible, making life beautiful, making life meaningful through small acts of attention and care. These are the teachers she wants for her child, these quiet practitioners of ordinary wisdom, these keepers of essential skills and gentle virtues, these people who understand that civilization is not built by emperors alone, but by countless individual choices to show up, to care, to continue the work of being human even when the future feels uncertain. The streets grow quiet now, the last vendors calling their wares, the final conversations fading into the comfortable sounds of evening, doors closing, families gathering, lamps being lit in windows throughout the city. This is the hour when public life gives way to private reflection, when the day's accumulation of experiences settles into memory, when the soul finds space to breathe and rest and prepare for whatever tomorrow might bring. In 4 different homes, 4 different hearts are learning the same lesson, discovering the same truth that the wisest philosophers have always known, that peace comes not from the absence of uncertainty, but from the presence of purpose, not from controlling the future, but from fully inhabiting the present, not from grand gestures, but from faithful attention to the small, sacred tasks that make each day a gift rather than a burden. Julia banks the fires in her father's ovens, knowing they will be rekindled before dawn, trusting in the rhythm that has sustained her family for generations. Marcus caps his ink and covers his parchments, preparing for tomorrow's careful work of preservation. Cassia covers her clay to keep it moist and workable, ready for another day of patient creation. Antonia draws the curtains against the night, creating a sanctuary of warmth and anticipation where new life can grow in safety and love. And somewhere in the palace, an emperor writes his own thoughts about virtue and mortality and the proper way to live, unaware that his deepest insights are being lived out in bakeries and scriptoriums and pottery workshops and humble homes throughout his city, unaware that wisdom is not the possession of the powerful, but the birthright of anyone willing to pay attention, to care deeply, to find meaning in the work that their hands and hearts are called to do. The moon rises over Rome, casting silver light on marble columns and modest doorways alike, illuminating the faces of the sleeping and the wakeful, blessing the dreams of emperors and bakers and scribes and potters and expectant mothers with the same gentle radiance, the same promise that morning will come, that the work will continue, that the great human conversation will go on, carried forward by countless voices, countless hands, countless hearts that choose again and again to believe in the possibility of beauty, the necessity of love, the quiet triumph of showing up for life exactly as it is, ordinary and sacred, uncertain and precious, fleeting and eternal, like bread rising in darkness, like words preserved on parchment, like clay shaped by patient hands, like new life growing in the sanctuary of hope, like this moment, like this breath, like this gentle settling into rest, into trust, into the deep knowing that we are all connected, all part of the same ancient story, all held by the same vast tenderness that turns the stars in their courses and shapes the dreams of the sleeping city and whispers to every tired heart that it is enough. You are enough. This day was enough, and tomorrow will unfold exactly as it should, with bread and words and clay and love, with ordinary miracles and quiet wisdom, with the same patient grace that has carried humanity through every darkness, into every dawn, into every moment of beauty that makes the whole long journey worthwhile.